If you're an HR professional who works hard to fill roles within your company, keep employees engaged, and build company culture, welcome to America Back to Work, where dreams only work if we do. We'll share wide-ranging issues surrounding pre-employment background screening, HR topics such as recruiting, hiring, labor trends, and company culture, as well as broader HR-influenced business topics such as customer experience, service level excellence, and protecting what matters through best practices in prevention, protection, and corporate security. America Back to Work is brought to you by S2 Verify. Here's your host, Arnette Heintze.
Welcome to America Back to Work, brought to you by S2 Verify, where our purpose is to help you hire with confidence and manage insider risk. I'm your host, Arnette Heintze. Thank you for joining. Today, our guest is Brad Eddy. Brad is a highly experienced HR pro and consultant with extensive expertise at large and small organizations, serving in roles from HR generalist to director and currently as the senior manager of employee relations business partner at HelloFresh. Brad is also the owner and principal consultant of Bradley, which offers customized, scalable, and compliant HR services that fuel business growth. Brad, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm delighted to have you and looking forward to our conversation. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about your background with our audience?
Sure. Thanks again, Arnette. So happy to be here. So yeah, I, as many people, did not see myself going into HR. It kind of was like a oopsie. But as I, graduated high school and went into my professional career, I started in kind of service-based roles, not really knowing what I wanted to do. And I always saw this hallway where people would go and talk to, whoever was in that hallway and come back either smiling or frowning. And I always was interested in kind of what do those people do? So that was kind of my first introduction to HR. So then I decided that I wanted to kind of dive into that. So I went to school to learn more about HR and business. So like many people in HR, I started as an HR generalist, really just getting the basic understanding, well-rounded in the function, kind of feeling out like where my passion lied. And as I continued to kind of grow in my career, I focused more and more on employee relations. And like you said, I did start my own company during the pandemic. So that was exciting. I just wanted to kind of leverage my HR and ER expertises for, startups and small businesses. And what we do at Bradley is just offer subscription-based consulting for businesses that kind of scale alongside their business growth. So totally happy to be here.
Oh, that's great. Wonderful. I know today's conversation, we're going to focus in on employee relations, which I think is a critical topic in that HR spectrum. And, I know your experience, you've worked at large and small organizations. Can you tell us a bit about your approach to employee relations and, where it fits within HR programs?
Yeah, no, definitely. So my thought process on ER has evolved as I've gotten deeper and deeper into the function. But the way I see employee relations is really at any organization, you kind of have two key HR partners, right? So you have your HR business partners who are ingrained in business units, helping drive strategy, growing the bench, really focusing more on, succession, bench strength, and getting, to specific groups to where they need to be based on company goals. And then you have ER, which, supports the business in a different way. So from an ER perspective, we really focus on risk and policy, trying to have the organization create policies that are employee-centric around the employee experience and actually like focusing on their growth and well-being and satisfaction. So that's one way that ER helps the business. I think also another way is just proactive engagement and communication. What we do from the ER side is really help leaders maintain, transparent and effective communications with employees, really stressing and helping them address issues before they escalate making sure that the employees' voices are heard, and really just helping leaders, effectively manage the efforts of others as they go through the employee life cycle. And then the last thing I would say is just as ER has evolved in times, there's been a huge focus on data. So from an ER perspective, how can we use data that we collect, from employee feedback, issue trends that we see, performance data, and really help tailor those HR initiatives to meet those organizational goals as the company continues to grow.
That's great. So you mentioned that when the pandemic struck, that led you to establishing your consultancy. And along that lines, what were some of your first thoughts about how the pandemic was going to impact HR and employee relations? And, the great resignation and the war on talent, was that predictable in your opinion?
Yeah. So, like a lot of people, it caught us off guard. I remember vividly, I was sitting in my office at ZipRecruiter, and I got a call from our CHRO saying, "Hey, we need to do this. We need to move quick." So I was in the office probably until midnight that night with a kind of a group of key stakeholders trying to figure out how we were going to make this work. So the first thing that came to mind, and when we were trying to figure out how we were going to navigate the pandemic, was remote work and flexibility. A lot of organizations never had remote workforces. And from my perspective, from an ER perspective, how are we going to shift that work to be remote? How are we going to keep employee engagement? How are we going to handle employee issues? And then also keep that company culture. I think another thing that popped up and that was top of mind was just employee well-being. These were uncharted times for everybody. So we really had to focus on making sure that we were attending to employees' mental health, and also just making sure that they have support systems in place, being a remote and distributed workforce. And then also just, communication. Like, how are we going to be clear and consistent in our communication? We all can't just huddle on the floor and have a big team meeting. You have to be very intentional. So that was another thing that really rose to the top of my mind. Regarding the Great Resignation and the war on talent, I think the Great Resignation was somewhat predictable. As remote work continued, we saw employees, kind of reassess their work-life balance, their job satisfaction, which, led to a lot of people just making shifts in their career priorities. And then the war on talent, I think that was pretty foreseeable, just, due to the broader talent pool that organizations now had from remote work. So it really challenged organizations to get a little more creative on how they recruit, what benefits to offer, and what arrangements they also had for employees.
So now that we're sitting here at the beginning of 2024, it seems to me that the job seekers market has swung back towards the employer's market. And do you share that perspective? And how, in spite of that, how are companies approaching employee relations today?
Yeah, so I think, in that post-pandemic landscape, companies are continuing to approach employee relations with, several key strategies. I think one is having, enhanced employee engagement. Companies are really focusing more on improving the engagement, trying to retain that talent, making sure that they have, initiatives such as career development programs, and also just recognition for employees. That's gone a long way. Many organizations are continuing to offer flexible work arrangements, which I think is not going away. We might not see as many remote work arrangements, but we're going to see more of that hybrid, flexible work model. And then also, what I've seen huge, especially in tech organizations, is just the culture and community building. So there's been very strong efforts to kind of strengthen company culture, bring a sense of community. We've seen the rise of employee resource groups, or ERGs, to really help, employees kind of find their tribe, right, and build their community at work, so that they feel, that that satisfaction and that success as well.
Right. Right. So it's my understanding that not all companies have dedicated employee relations pros on their teams. When do you think it's necessary for a company to have a dedicated resource to something so critical?
Well, like everything, I think it depends. I think it depends on, the company size and the complexity of the organization, the industry. So as any organization grows, and gets more complex, more products, more services, more departments, I think the need for a more specialized ER function becomes more apparent. Uh, it typically kind of floats to the top when routine HR functions begin to kind of overshadow strategic employee relations initiatives. So that's one way. I think also if you see an increase or an uptick in employee issues, um, if there's an uptick in conflicts, grievances, just overall employee dissatisfaction from employee engagement surveys, I think that's a clear sign that you may need a focused team to drive attention towards these things and kind of manage and resolve those issues effectively. And then also just, as with anything, the legal and the compliance needs, right? So as organizations grow, there's more legal requirements that they need to follow as well. But also, as you're aware, like things are changing all the time. So there may be a need to have a more centralized function to kind of address those challenges and help navigate the workplace through those changes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm of the belief that anytime you have more than two individuals in a company, you have a high chance at some point in time to have a conflict. So
Exactly.
you have conflict between employees, conflicts between employees and management. What do you offer as some best practices to managing these conflicts in the workplace?
That's a great question. So I like to have this conversation with a lot of my leaders whenever I go into an organization and kind of support them from an ER function. So I think first and foremost, it's early intervention. If you see something, say something, address the conflicts promptly so that they don't escalate. A lot of times leaders will, sometimes sweep things under the rug or not think it's a big deal, but then it escalates and then it comes to my team. So definitely address conflicts promptly as they arise. Again, open communication. I think it's important to kind of have a safe environment for open dialogue and honest dialogue with your employees. I think fast feedback is a great tool for leaders to use. Don't wait till performance reviews. If you have something constructive that you want to tell your employee or have them work on, or even just something positive, make sure that you're giving that feedback, pretty much in the moment. Also, a lot of times you have to remind leaders to listen. Make sure that you're practicing those active listening skills to really understand like where your employee's coming from fully. Don't just assume you know what's going on. Listen to what they're saying to you. And then the big one for me, and it's never stressed enough, documentation, right? If it's not documented, it shouldn't happen.
Right.
So you need to keep, those accurate records of any feedback, investigations, conflicts, as well as those resolutions that you have when you're dealing with the employees.
Yeah, you're spot on about documentation. I can't tell you how many times I've come across where I've had a team of leaders in a company where they'd have issues, but they just failed to document it. And it always came back to get us if we didn't document it. So that's a great piece of advice out there for everybody.
Exactly.
So let's talk about transparency and sensitive information. When you have employees relations, you want to be transparent, but at the same time, there might be sensitive areas of communication that you've got to hold tight.
Yeah.
What's your suggestion on how to handle this, and any experiences you have in this space?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think, transparency is something that employees want and crave. So I think, and I've seen this work in organizations that I've been at, regular updates are fine and good, right? So keep the employees informed, even if it's, something you can't necessarily talk about or divulge the details, just let them know that it's top of mind for you as a leader. When I worked at Facebook during the pandemic, was fully remote, 60,000 plus employees. Like, how do you keep them engaged and happy with the changes that were going on? So one thing that we implemented was weekly town halls where senior leaders would come on, talk about the company, talk about updates that needed to be discussed, and then also just provide a space for employees to ask questions and just be really transparent and authentic with them. Kind of piggybacking off that, I think you want to encourage employee feedback. Again, invite them to have questions and address those concerns. And then for me, consistent messaging is something that sometimes organizations struggle with. So make sure that you, whatever information you're relaying and you're sharing with different leaders, make sure it's the same message and they have key talking points that they can kind of refer to. One thing that I've found that works great is always to have kind of like a pre-release meeting with leaders to talk about the changes, what's happening, why it's happening, and really providing them those talking points, but also an FAQ document because, employees will ask questions and one leader will say this, another leader will say that, and then we have ER issues.
Yeah, so true, so true. So, what advice do you have for organizations looking to build trust and credibility? We all management, all, entrepreneurs can have moments where they're challenged of making sure they hold on to the trust and credibility with their employees. And when they make a misstep, there's a competitive place out there for jobs right now. And I think you have a tendency maybe losing some talent that you don't want to lose. What kind of thoughts do you have in this area?
Yeah, no, great question. Again, I think top of mind for me is having that open and transparent communication. Again, like employees want to know what's going on. If you send an email and say something's changing, but you don't really tell them why, or give them some insight into why the organization's going in a particular way, they're going to make up their own stories, and it's just going to create more and more disruption on the work floor. So make sure that you have open and transparent communications when you can, because transparency does foster trust, right? Again, going back to consistency, make sure that if you're a leader and you're making changes, make sure that your actions and words match, and make sure that they're kind of aligned with the employee values and promises. Make sure there's consistency so that you can build that credibility.
Yeah.
Another thing that is huge that I've seen kind of evolve over the pandemic and into 2024 is just employee development. Employees really want to know what their journey looks like at the organization. So make sure that you provide clear opportunities for them, whether it's career pathing, professional growth and development. Make sure that you're taking that time investing in the employees to show that they have a future at the organization. And that really helps build that loyalty.
Yeah, no, that's so true. What about some examples of successful employee relation strategies that you've seen companies, implement over the last, maybe call it 2-3 years? Because I know, the pandemic resulted in changes forever, but I'm pretty confident you've seen some really successful programs. Some examples that you can share with us.
So I think one example, and it came out of the pandemic, is those flexible work arrangements. Adoption of the remote work, flexible hybrid models really helped employees kind of balance their work life, and also, gave them time to kind of get that satisfaction with the job. Now that they have that flexibility, they can focus more on things that are important to them. I've also seen just a big push for health and wellness programs. not just mental health, but also just wellness in general, to help prioritize just employee well-being. And then again, just going back to those DE&I efforts, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I've seen the implementation of robust diversity programs and inclusion policies that have really helped make workforces more diverse and really having a place for everyone at the table. So I've also seen those work well.
Yeah, you're so dead on with the wellness programs. We've had a couple of conversations over the year or so here with experts building those programs, and that's really, we're seeing a much higher level of demand for that in the workplace now. And if you could bring out a crystal ball here, what would you say the trends that you see shaping the future of employee relations, and how do you think this field is going to evolve?
Good question. Who knows, right? No.
Yep.
I think there's still going to be an increased focus on remote and hybrid work models. It's going to, like I said, you're probably not going to see as many remote opportunities, but you're going to see those hybrid work models. So helping employees kind of have that option, and really figuring out, how organizations are going to, one, support that. Again, how are they going to have engagement, communicate with the remote employees who may not be in the office every day? And how do you manage performance and accommodate these work issues?
Right.
Again, I think mental health and well-being. So there's going to be a heightened focus on mental health in the workplace. We've seen this through, additions to benefits packages. One thing that we have at HelloFresh is, employees all get access to the app called Headspace. So they have that resource available to them if they do need to, focus on some, me time or mental health. So we're going to see more and more benefits like that arriving to the workforce. And I think also, just the advancement in technology, the use of AI for data analytics is going to play a huge role in how organizations kind of approach employee relations and engagement, and really focus on having more predictive analytics to kind of move through the workforce. And then a given, right? Legal and regulatory changes. Those are not going anywhere. So there's going to be changes, and there already are changes on the books that we need to help organizations kind of navigate through.
All right. So it looks like our time is coming to a close. But before we sign off today, I'd like to ask you a question that I ask all of our guests. And that is, if S2 Verify were to conduct a background investigation on you, Brad, would there be any surprises?
Well, I think if you were to run a background check on me, the biggest surprise you're going to find is not that I'm not, an HR superhero. I'm just a normal guy who likes to help employees navigate situations through the workplace. Also, you may see that, like we talked before the podcast, that I'm from Western New York. And one fun fact, which probably won't be on the background check, but I'll just leave you with this fun fact. The county that I grew up in had more cows than people. So you may be able to do some fact finding based on that background check and look into that county and see where I came from.
There you go. All right. Well, Brad, thank you so much. Would you mind sharing with our audience where they can keep track of you and what's going on in your world?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I'm on LinkedIn. So if you type in Brad Eddy onto LinkedIn, I think I'm one of the first people that pops up. Kind of a unique name. And I'm also on Instagram. So I have my own HR persona on Instagram, and that's at that guy in HR.
Oh, right. Wonderful. Well, now, as we come to an end here, I'd like to also have a minute with my partners, Jim and Bill at S2 Verify. One of the areas of focus for all of us at S2 Verify has been, giving fast, accurate, compliant, and very reasonably priced background screening services. However, I often hear in the industry of clients that have to wait 5, 7, 10 days to get just simple background checks done. Can you summarize what average turnaround times, Bill, we're currently providing to our clients?
Yeah, so our average turnaround time is under 24 hours. So that's the average across, all broads of spectrum. Some get reported within minutes. Some may take three days depending on the jurisdiction. But one of the things we've done is automate the processes where there's, as soon as an order is placed, we review it just to make sure it's accurate. We can take the information out that we don't need and make sure that it's the right background check. And then we release it in the system. And within, minutes, it's actually processing. And so a lot of the instant process, are done. It builds the address history off the credit header data. And then we go and do the actual background check. So simultaneously, it's ordering all this information at the same time. Whereas, some background check companies are actually doing it one by one. And so they're taking it from, I'm looking up a Massachusetts search. As soon as that's done, then I'll go over here and, start a verification. And then I'll go do the education. Ours is doing everything simultaneously. So we're reporting things much faster than our competition.
And I also think some clients aren't fully aware of the value of partnering with S2Verify is when we look at an individual, we can report to the client the number of addresses they've lived in, because many times the reporting of information is siloed in those individual jurisdictions where people have lived, but if they didn't report it on their applicant process, it could go undetected by the employer.
The previous, the credit header data will pull wherever they've lived, and it'll automatically populate that county or that federal jurisdiction or that state. So.
For our audience, please tune in next week when we continue our exploration of topics critical to success in HR. We'll see you then. And it goes without saying, let's get America back to work, because dreams only work if we do. Brad, thanks so much for joining. I look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks so much.
If you want to stay abreast of HR, recruiting, and hiring trends, tips, and tools, make sure you subscribe to America Back to Work. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating and a review.